Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this My HR Toolkit webinar. My name's Simon. Many of you know me. I'm the head of sales at My HR Toolkit, and I would like to welcome you to this webinar today. You may be familiar with the webinar process that we have. We've been running these webinars for about 18 months now, and today we're going to be talking about how to onboard new employees for your small business. I'll be handing over to our guest speaker, Adrian McDonagh, very shortly. As I said, you may be familiar with the way we do our webinars, so we'll have a little introduction. I'll hand over to our speaker. We will have some time after the talk for questions and answers. There's a Q&A section in your meeting toolbar that you can use. Before we do that, though, if this is your first time joining us, then you are very welcome. If you're returning, then thanks for coming back again. The chat feature is open. We love you guys to chat during the webinar, so feel free to use that chat. As I mentioned, we will have time for questions afterwards, and if you have specific questions regarding the webinar today, then do please add them to the Q&A feature. Otherwise, they'll get lost in the chat, and we won't be able to answer those for you after the talk. And I'd just like to clarify that today's session is offering general and not legal advice, and will be based on the information as available today. So here this morning to talk about how to onboard new employees for your small business is Adrian McDonagh, is the co-founder of Hireful. So Adrian, welcome to the webinar. Oh, I think you're on mute there, Adrian.
Hi Simon, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yes.
I forgot to push the red button on mine. So I was just explaining it's practical advice, but definitely not legal advice. Yeah, I'm definitely down with that.
Okay, fantastic. Well, if you want to share your screen, and you can take it away.
Okay, share screen. Yeah, there we go. So I guess that's coming through. You might give me a thumbs up.
It is, yes.
Excellent. Okay, guys. So I'll give you a very little quick bit of background on me. So I'm a co-founder here at Hireful. So I guess some of the stuff we're talking about today is how we onboard our staff here as well. We're obviously a small business. We're 50 staff, and we do recruitment software and recruitment advertising, and we do lots of training as well, which I'll touch on. Yeah, and our focus is we help everyday organizations. So whenever we do training, we always try and keep it very practical. We sort of focus on organizations typically below 1,000 staff who don't have huge budgets and huge teams to help them do this. So there's lots of stuff in here today that will be, either no cost or low cost, and also, fairly efficient in regards to your time, which is obviously the other big cost that we've got to bear in mind. I wanted to mention we do lots of free training ourselves. So there's a screenshot from one of my training sessions. I'm not trying to compete with Simon, but I'm just saying, putting it out there. Did 150 webinars in the last year, so we really are pushing the boat out with all the webinars we get involved in. So feel free to check out hireful.co.uk and sign up for that if there's any more time left in your life for more webinars. And yeah, let's focus on, we've got 4 steps we're going to look at today. If you've seen the itinerary, I probably should have had a slide saying itinerary just occurring to me. This is a new set of slides that I've got here. So we're going to be looking at, starting with the internal process. We're going to look at how you can make things a lot more digital. And then we're also going to think around some of those issues we've got around hybrid workers, remote workers now, and onboarding them, and then finishing up a few takeaways. So let's look at this internal processes. So I think the very first thing I would say is you're going to want to confirm and document this process. We're going to want to make sure that this process, I'm actually going to, if you bear me a second, I'm going to actually come out of this screenshot. So what I need to do, I need to be able to see my notes as well, guys. I've just realized I'm in the wrong view really. So let's end this view. Let's go to proper slideshow view. Where are we now? Sorry about this. Can't move my banner is in the way from Zoom. Let me just try and minimize this and I'll be able to get what I need. Slideshow. Okay, from the beginning. And there we go. That's much better. Let me zip back to where I was and I'll be able to actually see my notes. Here we go. Right. So yeah, there. Right. Great. Apologies for that. So yeah, we're going to want to make sure, we get everyone on the same page. You might already have a process on paper. We're going to want to make sure, managers aren't freelancing and we're all using the same process. Now that process might subtly change for different roles, but that's because you've agreed it. So what I would absolutely encourage you to do is get that process, especially as today, you'll probably have some ideas, hopefully coming from this session. So it's a good opportunity to sort of review that whole process and literally map it out each step. I'm really trying to think about, how to make it as good as it possibly can. I'll give you a few ideas on that in just a second. Now, I've used all of these 4 tools. I've tested them out. The one we've ended up with is ClickUp, but I generally recommend some sort of document or process management system, just so it's you can start building up this sort of onboarding process, and you can copy the process and assign it, and then everyone gets set tasks. All the documents are included within it, and everything's just neatly organized. And then if you decide, right now we've got, we want to look at that, we want to do something different because we're hiring an apprentice or something, you can clone that process and then look at it and think, well, how does it change for an apprentice? And it's just a lot better system to use. An online system where everyone's looking at that one same thing. It's a central master sort of plan of what you're doing. So I highly recommend those systems. There's a link to all these 4. I'm not making any money from them, but there's a link in all 4 of these in the appendix, which will share the notes with you. But obviously we want to be continually updating this process. So we've got to be thinking around this, it never stops. It's unlikely you're going to nail perfection first time out. Because you've got that online system, it allows you to just quickly nip into the template. If someone's come up with a good idea or there's been a problem, you can go in and change something, and then it's instantly updated for everyone now going forward. And like I said, you're going to find out new processes as well. So it's very, it's very key that you keep updating as you go. But as I mentioned, we're going to want to build a process, but we're going to want to build multiple processes. So that, it's not one size fits all. You're going to want to build things out differently for different types of scenarios. You probably already have that, but you want to just get all of them documented and neatly lined up. And then I think one of the really key things is, once you've got it documented, that very first one that you plan out is just to sort of hack away at all the unnecessary admin. Sounds pretty obvious, but I reckon once you get it down on paper, you've got to go at it with a mindset of, and of being able to, hopefully your organization has a high level of trust and you're able to challenge each other, and you're able to say, okay, well, why do we do that? And you can't really accept someone saying the old, well, this is how we've always done it. That approach isn't going to be sufficient. So you're going to want to be challenging stuff, questioning stuff, and the real time sinks, clearly those are the ones to sort of focus on. So, have a good look at those and really sort of think about them, challenge them. It might be that you need to reach out, so I love using LinkedIn if I've got a problem. So I might just post on LinkedIn. It's one of the ultimate things I tell people, that people don't make enough use out of. So if you've got a reasonable network on LinkedIn, post out to LinkedIn, we're looking at our onboarding, we're trying to, improve this here, or does anyone know how to sort of, or even just to get an opinion, is it typical that it takes this long to get the contract out, or is it typical that it takes this long to get background checking confirmed in this scenario? Whatever it is, whatever you're not happy with, and get some opinions, and people will reach out to you, and you might be able to get obviously some external opinions then outside of your organization, which could help support you in your case to make those changes. Okay. We did say there was a chat function, so I'm gonna put this up. I'm gonna come back to it in a couple of slides. Interested to see if any of you know the name of this film. It's from 1986. So if you're a little bit younger than me, then you might not know it. Bonus points if you want to name the 2 actors in shot. I'll come back to that in just a second. So one of the key metrics, there's a few metrics you want to be actually recording, and this is really key. With your recruitment process, that's a screenshot of our applicant tracking system, which I will say neatly integrates with my HR toolkit. And you can see, the idea is that, we're showing that, that process of saying, I want to make an offer now. And obviously the system records at what point the candidate applied, when they were shortlisted, when they were interviewed, when you offered them, when they started. So we have got that neatly organized from a reporting perspective and able to sort of show to our customers so they can understand that. But you need to be recording that yourself as well. If you don't have a system, you need to be tracking it. So just put a date into, at the end of the process, maybe, you can go back through and say, okay, when did we get the contract out? When did we do this? When did we decide we want that candidate? I think the two things are, the biggest time sinks I see from people that I speak to, and just to be clear, I've done training sessions with HR professionals, in-house recruiters for about 12 years now. And the biggest issue we tend to find are two areas are, it takes too long to decide post-interview on whether you want to offer the candidate. That really shouldn't take that much time. Once you've concluded all your interviews, it shouldn't take too long to decide. You should have a process. There should probably be some, scoring to reduce, the impact of things like unconscious bias. So you should be able to, score the candidate, you've assessed the candidate, and what the sort of benchmark is, and what the core competencies are. So if they fall below that core competency, then they're not going to be, you don't, clearly take them forward for the role. It's not about taking the best candidate, it's about taking the best candidate who also is good enough to do the role. But once you've made that decision, it shouldn't take you long to do it. And then the next step obviously is, how long does it take to get those details out, to the candidate, to get the offer out, to formally make the offer to the candidate. Typically what happens with a candidate, think about yourself, think about, your family members, friends, how they go about their job seeking. No one goes, yes, I've got another 4 interviews lined up this week. No one's excited to be doing interviews necessarily. They might be excited at the prospect of a new job. They might enjoy meeting people and going and, non-COVID lockdown world, maybe going and seeing offices and meeting people and seeing things. But the actual interview process is not fun. So people don't really enjoy looking for a job. They like the end result, but the actual journey, they don't like. So what typically happens with a candidate is they will accept the first offer that comes to them, typically, not always, but typically the first offer that comes to them that they deem to be a good offer. If their expectations are here and your offer is here, then that's typically what they do. So speed is huge, particularly in this market, but in any market as well, really. Speed, you might find, I always tell people that you might struggle to be, if you're a law firm, the #1 law firm in Sheffield. However, you might be able to be a very good law firm in Sheffield who actually has the slickest recruitment process and can, take a candidate from, applying through to offer in the fastest possible time. And that's a huge attribute. So you need to be looking at that. How long it takes you to get this offer out? Because until you get the offer out, to the candidate, they're not really yours. They haven't committed, and away they go. And even, as you all know, even getting the offer out, you've still got a big management process here of counter offers, which we see a lot of these days. And obviously they're not really your candidate until they start. And even then, who knows, which we'll talk about. Okay, so a key one that we're doing now with our software, so we'll be able to talk about this going forward. We're turning it on in our software where when a candidate completes an interview, it's hireful would email them saying, hey, look, our client really values their interview process. What was your experience like? And then there's a further one that happens at the end of the actual recruitment process. Like when that offer's made, it will go out as a time delay and say, hey, look, understand you've accepted your offer, which is fantastic news. Now our client would love to know, very open, transparent feedback as to what worked for you in regards to their recruitment process and what they could improve. So that's how it works for us with our software, but nothing stops you building your own survey. It could be anonymous, but I actually think when it's a new hire, because you may not, especially if you're a small business, if I got a new hire survey this week, it would filled out, it would be pretty easy for me to work out who it was. We're not hiring dozens of people per week. So I would probably make it, non-anonymous, if that's the phrase, and let the candidates just tell you, but empower them that, you really want them to be transparent. This is important to us. We want to improve. We really want to make sure we've got a great process that respects candidates and gives everyone a chance, to show their skills and experience. So with that in mind, can you, tell us where we can, what we did well and where we can improve. You won't always get, there'll always be candidates that want to hold back, but you'll also find there'll be plenty of candidates, if you do it in the right way, that will share with you properly, and then that's the real gold you're going to get. So I would survey new hires, and then I would also survey probably at a time like 90 days after someone started, to then survey that sort of induction onboarding process, just to get an idea from that. So you can sort of understand what the recruitment process was like, and then what was the onboarding process like. Okay, so moving on to that post-offer now. I mentioned this quiz, so I can see on the chat, let me just see, yeah, Christopher Lambert as well. John was the first to say Christopher Lambert, yeah, well done. So yeah, it's Highlander. Now, the reason I use Highlander, so thank you for posting on that, guys. The reason I use Highlander, the concept of the film Highlander, I just realised my kids haven't seen this film, and they're probably just about old enough to maybe watch it. Certainly the oldest one, maybe. But the concept of Highlander is they're immortals, but they go around chopping each other's heads off. If you're one of the immortals, you're driven to sort of kill the other one. And if you get your head chopped off, you're no longer immortal. So the concept of the film is there can be only one. Okay. So that's what I want you to think about in regards to managing your onboarding process. It also applies to sort of any elements of management, really. There can be only one person truly managing something, pure ownership. Now, you can delegate tasks left, right, and center, but one person has to be responsible for making sure that those tasks were done. Yeah. So if it's like, well, Sophie was meant to send out the background check request, and Tom was meant to Tom, the hiring manager, was meant to do the sort of keep in touch calls. If I'm managing that, I need to make sure they've done it. Yeah, it's down to me ultimately to ensure they've done it. And hopefully you've got a professional organisation where if you give someone a task, they do it. So you're not having to constantly badger them to do something that is pretty straightforward. But yeah, one person can own it. So one person owns the whole thing, and the person you pick, which will be an interesting conversation. It'd be interesting if you, once again, you're welcome to put on the chat as to who owns this. Is there one person in your organisation who owns this, and who it is? Typically, it would be the HR person, office manager maybe, if you don't have a permanent HR person there. It needs to be someone who's familiar with that process. So, they know what's meant to happen and where, what's the typical time frame for things, and everything else around it. Okay, so that's really quite key. So, you're not dropping a new person into this process, who doesn't really know what the process is, and just get on with it, because the biggest concern there is they'll either get it wrong or they'll take far too long because they're learning as they're doing. Okay, let me know if there's, keep posting questions. We'll get to them at the end. I always say I always say in my own webinars, post questions as we go, as you think of them, and then when we get to the end, there should be a good bank of questions to ask. Okay, so next tip is around flexible communication. So I think it's important to be flexible with your new hires, but I would, there's a limit to that. I wouldn't let them build the process. If you've got a process, they should work to that process. But there are some areas of it, and this is one of them, where you should probably have some options. And that's really good, because you're asking them to follow your process, and they might be like, okay, so it's quite nice as well to show you and give something back and say, what works best for you. So when it comes to communication, we're all very different. So if I get a phone number on my phone that I don't recognize, I don't answer it. So, the best way to stay in contact with me is probably email. I'm all over that. SMS, pretty good. Also WhatsApp, lots of candidates these days, WhatsApp is the easiest way to contact them. So, yeah, think about what works for those candidates, adapt to that. And do the communication via that method. Make a note on your process system that this candidate prefers this method of communication. So that's what we're going to go with. I haven't put phone here. phone is still very important, but I'm talking about the sort of quick back and forth. So if you've got a quick question, you know, what's the best, if I've got a question about anything, what's the best way of me reaching out to you? You know, if they're a good candidate, they're probably likely already in a job, so you can't be phoning them up during the day. They may not be checking their email as frequently. If you ping them on something that's going to make their phone ping, such as SMS or WhatsApp, then that works well, assuming they're comfortable with that and assuming, you know, that's what they would like. So yeah, highly recommend that. It's a quick way of engaging with them. I would also say, you know, once they come on board, in this day and age, you probably have your own version of that, like Teams or something. Once they're part of your business, Teams or Slack or something like that, then I would just remind them that, you know, the WhatsApp, that's finished now. If you want me from a work-related matter, we're all over Teams or Slack. Keep it over there. Okay, so that's quite key, I think. And then this one is super key, which is obviously schedule regular communication touch points. It really depends on how long that sort of notice period is, that sort of gap between them being hired to so being offered to actually starting with you. You know, how long is that? And that should be in your plan. Okay, so this is what we need to do. You know, 1 week before the person starts, without fail, the hiring manager's given them a call. And then what's in that call? Well, it's probably, you need to probably set out those objectives in the notes for the hiring manager. So regardless of, assuming it's, you know, if you've got 6 hiring managers all following this process, they're all getting, you know, similar set of notes. So if you're saying, you know, ask the candidate if they've got any issues, check they know where they're going on day 1, you know, make sure that, you know, they've got their uniform, if there's anything like that, you know, make it, it's like a checklist of things you're going through. But then you should say, not just all about process, have some nice things in there. So you might say to the candidate, we'd like to go for lunch on your first day, so I'd like to get that booked. Here are the sort of options that we normally choose from, 3 or 4 options. Once again, let the candidate choose, and then you can get that booked in. You know, remind them that, you know, you're excited and you're really pleased they're joining, and so is the whole team. So, you know, you're building that. It's like anything, until the candidate starts, putting my recruitment hat on, there's always that chance that they might drop out. Now, there is the potential, there is an argument that a candidate who drops out and, you know, maybe completely ghosts you, which does happen more and more these days, maybe you've actually dodged a bullet. And I know most people don't feel that way, but actually, if you've got a candidate who, you know, you put all the effort in, they've done a bit of effort, and once they've decided, actually, I've got a better offer, they just completely ignore you. Well, you probably have dodged a bullet with that candidate. They probably haven't got the right set of values and everything else to be a good fit. It's better they didn't start your business than they actually brought those values into your business and caused more problems. So yeah, if they are gonna disappear off, then fine. But equally, you know, you want to be having those conversations. So, you know, it might be something you can manage. It might be that they've just got a misconception over something. We've had clients, I sit near our agency team downstairs, and I can hear conversations with candidates that they're managing as the recruitment consultant, because they're making sure they're putting these calls in and making sure the candidate's warm and ready to start. And there's things popping up like, oh, you know, the onboarding process, just the employment contract seems, you know, very cumbersome. And it really, from setting a really welcoming position at interview stuff, they now worry that they're going to be micromanaged because all the detail in the contract was terrifying them in regards to that. So yeah, you need to be there managing stuff, building a rapport, having that clear line of communication so people feel that they've got someone they can reach out to, even though they don't necessarily know you that well. And ideally, that person should be the hiring manager, because the hiring manager and the new member of staff, that's the most important relationship. It's got to work well. So that's the one we want to start building from day one. Don't forget, the hiring manager is probably not owning the process. But so if you're owning the process, you need to make sure the hiring manager is doing this and actually does this and executes this. Okay, fine. So hopefully that gives you a few ideas. So I think another key thing as well that we see more and more is that sort of the training, but I'd also add to this as well, the compliance stuff doesn't have to wait till day one. So I'm doing more plugs for our stuff. That's a screenshot of our e-learning academy software. But I will mention there's a course there that we offer for free on unconscious bias that we've built. So feel free to go to our website and check that out if you want to sign up for that. You can check it out, and we've got lots of clients now who use that for all of their staff. So partly training, partly compliance. They might want to say, look, if you're going to join our business, then these are the training things we need to get you through. If you get a chance, it's all about what's reasonable, because they're not a paid employee. If you want to, like, you might say to them that this is by no means required, but if you want to sort of access some of this stuff, and if you have the time, you're on, maybe on garden leave, and you want to start getting up to speed so you hit the ground a bit faster, then you're more than welcome to. And I've made this available to you. But also bear in mind, we certainly don't mind. We don't judge you if you haven't had the time to do this. You're not a paid employee yet. So you need to put both sides there so they understand. If they do it, great. But if they don't, there's no harm there either. So certainly aspects of training that you might have e-learning wise might be things you want them to read. But certainly I would say as well, it could be contracts and policies you want them to sign. So once again, I think there's a few things I would say here is, you have to be careful you don't overload them. I just mentioned that it was actually a real life example, that the candidate was complaining that the contract was so cumbersome and really set the wrong tone. So if you fire 12 policies at them that are all very legalistic and painful before they enter the building, you might find that that's a little bit. But equally, if they're fairly standard things, like most people have policies around data protection and health and safety and things like that. And they might just be like, have a quick read of it and sign it. You might want to fire that to them in advance. And once again, if they get a chance, great. If they don't, you can cover it with them on day one or week one and cover it off there. The only exception to that is, obviously, if there's something that's an important policy, if data security is absolutely critical to your business, then you probably want to walk them through that policy and explain all the things and explain what it means, and go through it in good depth, rather than just give them a piece of paper to sign, because at least half the candidates will probably sign it without reading it. Okay, so yeah, just bear in mind, it might be useful to get some stuff out of the way before day one, because that's quite good for you. It means they get to do more of the fun, engaging stuff, and they can hit the ground faster for you. So, like I say, not all candidates are going to have that time to do it, but some will have the time and will want to, make sure that they're hitting the ground a bit faster. Okay, and obviously day one, really important. I think obviously it's the most important day. You need to plan out day one. Clearly the first impressions are going to count for a lot. I would imagine if we spoke about, people leaving in the first 90 days, people that leave after day one is probably the biggest drop off. And I'm not trying, that yourself probably, and I'm not trying to scare you, but people will get first impression, and things like just not being organized. Particularly if they've come from maybe a big corporate where there's a whole onboarding team that are used to managing this process and it's as slick as possible. Maybe they go into a big induction process of 6 or 7 new employees all joining that week, and everything's super organized. Well, great. And then they join your small business and no one knows what desk they're on, and Dawn, who was meant to be sort of looking after them on day one when they first got in, is off sick today, so there's no contingency to cover that. All of these things need to be thought through. So you need to have a very well organized. The level of planning you have for the first 90 days is massively concentrated in the first day, in the first week, in the first month, and then as you fade out, there's bigger gaps just appearing in that, obviously, as they're doing their job and doing other things. But day one, hugely critical, and add a bit of joy to it. Make a fuss. I've got a couple of examples. That's one on the left is our own office. New starter. We put some stuff on their desk. One of the things we do, which is quite a nice little caveat, is we do a little survey with a new starter. We love surveying. You've probably got that clear already from us. So we would ping a new employee a quick survey and say, look, we're just trying to get to know you. And get you to, and so we can, we're going to share this information so your, your team members will be able to see this. So we'll ask them things like, sort of what's their favorite food, what's their favorite sport, what's their favorite TV program, what music do you like? We've got a little Alexa, Amazon thing in our office. So, we'll make sure that, the playlists for a couple of their favorite bands are set up when they join. Like, we won't say it, but we'll see if they recognize it or someone will mention it. So yeah, we do little things like that. But what we also do is we take on board what they've said in that survey. So if they say, I like playing golf, and, what's your, are you more of a biscuit person or a cake person? What's your favorite biscuit? their favorite biscuits will be on their desk day one. So this helps us as a team to sort of be able to engage and speak to those people, because don't forget, we don't really want, well, we definitely don't want to be asking them questions like, what's your favorite football team? Or what do you do at the weekend whilst we're interviewing? Yeah, even after an interview or before an interview. That information is not relevant, and unfortunately it will sort of engage your unconscious bias. You can see that's a big subject for me. So, you know, your interview, whilst should be really nice and welcoming and friendly, it should be business focused. You shouldn't get too much into the small talk. So you shouldn't really have known much about the person's hobbies or interests unless they just dropped it into a question or something, which is fine, I guess. But actually now you want to capture that. Now you want to know the person on a more personal level. So you've got sort of those icebreaker conversations, and you can talk to them about their weekend, and, you know, and you can make sure that little pack that you send out is a little bit personalized to them. So on the left, in the office; on the right, if it's a remote person, nothing stops you sending out a little welcome pack. And the other thing I would sort of somewhat warn you about is this is more expected as well nowadays. So bear that in mind, it's more expected. So sometimes candidates will be underwhelmed with your approach. So they probably expect something, and it's such an easy thing to do. Okay, let's jump on. So going digital. So obviously we want the contract to be electronically signed. It's super easy to do that now. It's all accepted in regards to, you know, the validity of a contract and getting things signed. There's no reason. I mean, I had candidates in the past who, you know, when I was back in the day, a recruitment consultant, who would say, oh, I haven't got the contract, can you resend it in the post again? And you'd have to go back out again. And yeah, there's no reason to send anything snail mail as the first approach. Okay, so let me go back there, sorry. So, you know, snail mail, if they, you know, you should give the candidate a hard copy of the contract, absolutely. But that shouldn't be where you go first, okay? And any other documents you need done. If you need them to complete background checking, which, you know, if you don't do background checking, I would definitely encourage you to look into it. You think of the money you spend and the potential risk of bringing someone into your business. Getting background checking is a great idea, particularly if you confirm it early in the process to the candidate. Oh, by the way, we're all background checking against all these things here. And then some candidates will go, oh, by the way, I think I made an error on my CV. You know, those grades are not quite those grades. I think, yeah, it's a small error, but, you know, you'll find it comes up before you even have to get down the path with background checking. But whether it's background checking or a contract, you know, the forms you need signed to get permission to do stuff should all be done online. And if you're not just are you losing time, potentially losing candidates, then you're also creating a bad impression. You know, the expectation for candidates would be that, you know, this happens online. Why can't we just do it quicker? Okay. So one little tool that we like here, I'm going to mention a few. This is the Going Digital section. So I mentioned a few tools here. If you've not used online form builders, then I highly recommend them. Easy to use. You need to be sort of fairly digitally literate. We like Jotform. Reason we like Jotform, slightly from a GDPR perspective, you can set it up so that all of the data, bear in mind this is personal data you'll be capturing here from employees, it stays within the EU, which is most of the forms are American, which gives you further issues around GDPR and data. But Jotform's super easy. So when you look at your process and you get back to that map and you go, right, we need to gather this information, and this information, what's the easiest way to gather that? If you're comfortable building online forms, then you might find that's the easiest way to do it. It sort of centralizes everything. It's not on Tony's email or Dawn's email. It's there, it's in a central place. When you no longer need it, you can easily delete it. So it's a huge benefit, and it's efficient. You know, everyone involved in that onboarding process can get confirmation once that step's been done and you have that information back. So highly recommend building your own online forms. Pretty cost effective as well. This is a very, I think there's a free version. Most of the time you're not paying for a slightly better than the free version, but it's only costing you a few dozen pounds a month. I wanted to also mention you can go and get a full onboarding solution. So we partner with Web Onboarding, and just to give you a picture of how this is different. You know, it's every step in the whole process is built into the system. And, you know, the candidate experience is a lot better because, you know, they get access to a mobile app. They can, so you can see the little image there of the mobile phone. They can see all the steps they've completed, nice and visual. They've got access to what they want. They can message you via that app, and, you know, it all comes back. So it's just a lot slicker. I would say for a small company, you know, from a cost perspective, it really depends on, one, how many people you onboard a year, and then two, you know, how painful. You know, the bigger organizations, if you're a charity and you're working with vulnerable adults, something like that, then clearly the onboarding process of all the background checking and all the other things you've got to get in place, it's a much bigger process. So it's either if the process is bigger or there's lots of it, then it sort of maybe gets to a point where it warrants looking at a proper solution, such as web onboarding, which I would recommend. Okay. And as a last thing I mentioned in this digital thing, you have to be careful of, you know, data just going here and there and everywhere. From a, you know, from a GDPR perspective, you don't want, you know, contracts saved over here on someone's file and someone's hard drive. You don't want something else elsewhere. Bank details are now sent over here. You know, you want this all you need to be very mindful of how you're collecting it, where you're storing it. And as much as possible, I think the rule of thumb would be to avoid email. Email is great for the communication, but if you're collecting information, try and avoid email, because if it's going via email, it's going to one person and they'll reply it, and it will, you know, and it will sit in their sent items. And they may create their own folder called HR emails, and it goes into that folder and it's still sat there. You know, it's not necessarily that confidential, and it's not that protected. So you want it in one place. You know, if that person leaves your organization, a bit like with, you know, My HR Toolkit, so you're probably collecting it, storing it into your My HR Toolkit system or whatever HR system you use. And then once they leave, you can delete it, and you know it's deleted from everywhere. So yeah, data security is something to be very, very mindful of. Okay, coming up on the end, I'm going to zip through some of these. So looking at the last section now, strategies for remote and hybrid employees. Okay, so a few little quick things. Well, we hire people that will work remote from us. We've got someone downstairs, a new hire to our sales team. She's spending 2 or 3 days with us here in the office doing her induction. She's based in London. We're just in Northamptonshire, and it's like, great, come up, we'll put you in a hotel. And you know, it's important for us, this is our approach, that if possible, we do on-site inductions, if possible. Okay, great way to meet the team. You've got that bonding thing. You know, if they're in the local area, then we've gone out. I might have had a pint or a couple of drinks with them last night as well as a group. So we've had a little social, we've bonded, great. And I feel like I know that person. I'm going to see them on the screen for the rest of the year until they pop back in again. And there's a good relationship there. So massively encourage on-site inductions if possible. When planning out people's events, people's schedules, so their first 90 days, certainly the first couple of weeks, you've got to be very careful of avoiding those back-to-back meetings. All the stuff that you're teaching them might make perfect sense to you, but the sheer amount of stuff they're having to sort of bring in is probably overloading them. So you've got to build in lots of gaps for them just to review what they've learned, just to sort of maybe do something else rather than being spoken to and trained. To maybe give them an exercise they can do and things like this. You want to avoid, and that applies whether they're on site or off site, you want to avoid the back-to-back, now meet this person, now I've got you scheduled in with this person, now I've got you scheduled in with this person. They're all going to tell you what their department does, what they do. You're going to retain 5% of it, and you're going to be exhausted by the end of the day. So yeah, we want to try and avoid that. And then as well, I think something that we've seen come up a bit more in some of the webinars that we've done, speaking around sort of the lockdown and this process and how people have morphed to wherever it is, remote or hybrid working. So just to be clear, hybrid is where it's partly in the office, partly working from home. You need to have your clear instructions. So, you know, if you say to people, you know, I expect you, you possibly don't expect them to dress in a suit, or maybe you do. It depends on what your culture is. But you probably expect them not to be dressed in their pajamas. You would expect them, certainly from a health and safety perspective, to be sat at a desk or stood at a desk, either standing desk, that's my preference, but you don't want people to be, you know, doing their day's work from their bedroom. So you need to have set these things up. And that would come out at interview. You would say to the candidate, okay, and obviously you're working remotely. Is there a place in your house that you've got, you know, to work? What is that? How does it look? Fantastic, brilliant. Okay, other things you might want to think around. you know, fairly standard, but at 9:15, 9:30, whatever works. I will try and avoid the 9 o'clock if that's when your business day starts. Check in, you know, give them a chance to sort of check their email, get a bit of a shape on their day, write a to-do list of what they're going to do that day, and then check in at 9:30. So that's going to be really key as well. So yeah, and I think the last thing to say is, you know, from a cultural perspective, when you provide these clear instructions, you know, you don't, if you're moving to some sort of remote hybrid process, you can't micromanage people. In fact, I would say to people, if your culture is that, you know, there's a lack of trust with your employees, you know, managers want to be on them all the time and know what they're doing, then you probably shouldn't move to a remote hybrid process, because it's simply not going to work. You know, the idea of remote hybrid is you give them the work and you let them get on with it. Okay. Another little idea that we had, someone mentioned, and I know, was camera on mornings. So this doesn't necessarily describe it, but the idea is if there's like a team of developers or a team in the marketing team, you might say like, okay, we're all working remote now on Thursday, guys, you know, our day in the office is Tuesday or whatever you're doing. But if everyone's working from home on a certain day, you might say, okay, well, there's no meetings on Thursday morning. Let's have that as our camera on morning, and just leave the camera on, and you're all working away, and you can click in and you can see it, not to see who's working. It's just to be able to go, oh, Tony, I wanted to mention blah, 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 blah. And as things are, it's worth trying. It's trying to resemble more of a normal work environment. But you know, people don't want it on all the time, but being able to have a camera on morning and then turn it off and do something other focused stuff later on is just an idea that you might want to think about. Okay, just finishing up. So key takeaways, guys. Make sure there's I can't read the Zoom thing in my way. Make sure there's a robust process to your onboarding that's going to be free from unnecessary admin. These are the 3 things that I thought were the biggest takeaways. You want to make sure that it's flexible enough. Whatever process you have, flexible is going to be key, and it's going to be flexible for all of those relevant roles and the different types of work. So you're going to have a different process onboarding someone if they're based remote or if they're based in the office. And then the last but not least, you want to make sure it's measured for success and constantly improving. So yeah, keep getting that survey data through. Maybe have an annual review of it where you look at it and you go, right, what can we do here ourselves, taking a step back? What have we learned? How has technology moved on? How has expectations moved on from candidates? What should we do to improve this? Okay, and that's pretty much it. I just wanted to mention before we jump to questions, 2 weeks' time, we've got our sub 1000 recruitment conference, which is 3 days. We've got 14 different talks that are happening. You can sort of tune in, tune out. It's all free. It's the only recruitment conference in the UK aimed at organisations under 1,000 staff. So if you are recruiting, you're in that world, we'd love you to register and get involved. And that's my final little sales pitch for today. So yeah, I'm back ready with questions, Simon, if we've got any.
Yes, we do have a question from Catherine, who says, I keep going round in circles on the government website. How do you do a DBS check on a new employee?
So, Catherine, it's not something that I've done myself. The government websites actually generally, slightly bizarrely, have a good reputation. I think most of us, when we've had to use, certainly, you know, we've all probably, most of us have done the vaccine and registered for that. And a lot of the government websites are actually really good. So I'm surprised that that's not very good. I know most of the customers that we talk to, work with, tend to have a provider that they will use for DBS checks. And there tends to be fairly standardized sort of admin fees of £10, £15 approximately that they charge for managing that. Now, if you're a small business and you only do 2 or 3 a year, I don't know whether they would engage with you. But yeah, that would be the only piece of advice I could say. Yeah, on that. Obviously, the key process is obviously once you've signed a candidate up, they would have to then authorize. We've all been through that DBS process. You'd normally have to, the candidate has to fill it out themselves and give authorization for the checks to happen. But yeah, I think you're struggling just to get it kick-started. So I can't help with that, I'm sorry.
Sarah's added into the chat that they use an umbrella company for DBS checks called Mayflower Disclosure. There we go,
great sharing. Yeah, and there's one in Milton Keynes. I can't remember the name of it now, but that was quite good as well. So yeah, if I remember it, I'll mention it and get it onto the email that goes out. But yeah, there's a few, but feel free to connect me on LinkedIn. And what I do quite often, if people reach out to me, you will see me on LinkedIn, and I will say, particularly if there's something that they don't want the world to know they're doing. So I'll say, I've got a client who needs to do this, or has an employee who's not very happy and has raised this concern. And obviously, I'll do it as anonymous, asking for a friend, and then they can watch the feed of people that are recommending stuff. So yeah, if you want to connect to me, I think, Catherine, I'm more than happy to ask that question. I've got lots of contacts in the not-for-profit sector who will be experts on DBS, who will be able to tell you, whether that's, can you find a provider if you're only doing half a dozen checks a year, or feedback on the government website, etc.
Okay, a few people recommending the different companies they use for DBS checks. That is it for questions at the moment. If you do have any more, just drop them in quickly now. Copies of the slides, we'll send a link with to the recording and the slides out afterwards. We do that with all attendees for our webinars. It just leaves me to say thank you very much, Adrian, for joining us today. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everybody who has joined us on the webinar as well. As I said, we will be sending out a copy of the recording and those slides. If you'd like to catch up on any of the previous webinars that we've done, just go to myhrtoolkit.com/webinars. We have recordings to all the webinars that we've done there. And then if you look out on that page, we do advertise the upcoming webinars that we have as well.
Right, Sam, we have got one last question come in. I can answer it if you've got time. Is that Ellie's just asked. What advice would be for startups that are insanely growing but are struggling on implementing processes at the same time? So Ellie, I would recommend, most startups will be very sort of techie, digitally literate people. So it might be those 4 tools I recommended: Coda, Notion, ClickUp, and Monday.com. There probably might be one of them already that's sort of gained traction in the business. So I'd find out which tool that the business already might use, hiring managers might already be familiar with. And I know you said you don't have time. It is quite quick to one, learn how to use those tools, remarkably quick. But also, I would just take where's the biggest risk or the biggest process sink that you need. It could be, right, we want to make sure that we get all these things done so we get the offer out as quick as possible, or it could be, we want to make sure those 90 days the person starts, that the key things are done. We'll build out more detail as we go, but for now, let's just put in the key things. So my advice would be, get started on a very light level and just build the detail as you go. So you might find you're writing an email to a new hire, and you're going, I could just document this and put this in the system now, and the template's there for everyone else if they're doing this process. So you document as you go. There's no real massive way of there's no perfect solution, but yeah, that's the best I could do.
Brilliant. Thank you, Adrian. And again, thanks everybody for joining. Have a fantastic day.
All right, thanks, Simon. Bye, guys.